the offshore renewable catapult at Blyth, the digital catapult at Sunderland, and the satellite applications catapult in Durham. This is a deep investment in the North East economy of tomorrow.
We now come to SNP spokesperson Carol Monaghan.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. One of the companies based in Net Park is Pragmatic Semiconductor, who are innovating chip production. Now, they've indicated that they would consider moving operations overseas if the UK fails to produce a semiconductor strategy which is funding and supporting chip production. We've been asking for this strategy for years now. Can the Minister assure the House not only that this strategy is imminent and will be published very shortly, but also that it will properly fund and support companies like Pragmatic?
But, Mr Speaker, yes, my honourable friend the Minister has already met the company concerned, and in a matter of days we will be setting out the semiconductor strategy, which will answer exactly the question the honourable lady has addressed.
Jim Lord.
Number 5, sir.
Thank you very much, Mr Speaker. Artificial intelligence plays a vital role in our economy and society, from helping doctors identify cancers faster to powering smart devices and driverless cars. We recognise the need to act to unlock both the opportunities and to address the potential risks of this technology. Our white paper articulates what the responsible development and use of AI should look like, supporting innovation while protecting people so that businesses, consumers and the wider economy can all benefit.
Jim Lord.
Mr Speaker, when advances in medical technology around genetic engineering, for example, raise sensitive issues, we have debates on medical ethics, we adapt legislation and put in place robust regulation and oversight. And the explosion in AI potentially poses the same level of moral dilemma and is open to criminal use for fraud, impersonation and by malign players such as the Chinese government, for example. So as leaders in AI, what should the UK be doing to balance safety with opportunity and innovation?
Mr Speaker, I recognise the quite profound experience from which my honourable friend speaks, and we also recognise that many technologies can pose a risk when in the wrong hands. The UK is a global leader in AI with a strategic advantage that places us at the forefront of these developments. Now, through UK leadership, including at the OECD, the G7, the Council of Europe and more, we are promoting our vision for a global ecosystem that balances innovation and the use of AI, underpinned by our shared values, of course, of freedom, fairness and democracy. Our approach will be proportionate, pro-innovative and adaptable. Meanwhile, of course, the integrated review refresh recognises the challenges that are posed by China.
Ben Jones.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. With elections underway and a general election due next year, people are rightly concerned about the fake videos, images and audio being created by artificial intelligence. Can the Secretary of State confirm to the House what actions her department is taking to protect the integrity of our democratic processes in that context?
Mr Speaker, I welcome the honourable gentleman's involvement here, and may I say I look forward to debating these issues with him and others across the House. I can understand his concerns and the anxiety that sits behind his question. Now, of course, we have a fully developed regime of electoral law that already accounts for election offences such as false statements by candidates. But we are setting out, in addition to that existing regulation, an approach on AI that will look to regulators in different sectors to be able to apply the correct guidance, whilst we also add a central coordinating function that will be able to seek out risks and deal with them flexibly, appropriately and proportionately.
Select Committee, Greg Clark.
Thank you very much indeed, Mr Speaker. Can I warmly welcome my right honourable friend to the dispatch box. In my experience, you can get a lot done in 10 weeks, and I'm sure that she will. At its best, Britain has been highly influential in setting international standards, combining confidence with security. So does my right honourable friend agree with the chair of the Business Select Committee and myself that the UK should now seize the initiative and set out an international approach to the standards in AI so that we can gain all of the benefits that come from AI, but make sure that we don't suffer the harms that are attendant on it?
Mr. Speaker, I think the short answer there is yes, and may I welcome my right honourable friend's expertise and the experience that he also offers in encouraging me as I begin this role. But he is right. The UK does have a global leadership position. We rank in the top 3 in the world on many aspects of this question and others throughout science and technology, and therefore that is the type of role we will be seeking to take to reflect our values and strike the correct balance in the regulation that may be needed in terms of AI.
Kevin Brennan.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. One area in which our global leadership is a reality and not just rhetoric is in our creative industries. And what assurance can the government give to our music makers, our writers and so on, that AI will be properly regulated to make sure that their creative content is protected and we can maintain that global leadership?
Mr. Speaker, the honourable gentleman makes a very good point, and I know that it comes from a deep expertise in music and the creative industries more generally, and that is why I'm looking forward to conversations on that very subject with the industry this afternoon. For example, the UK has world-leading protections for copyright and intellectual property. We know how important those are for the continued success of the creative industries. We want to maintain them, and therefore that will be a focus as we take this work forward.
James Sutherland.
Question 6, please, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. With your permission, I'll take questions 6 and 10 together. In March 23, the government published its Science and Technology Framework, which sets out our approach to make the UK a science and technology superpower by 2030, which will increase the UK's strategic advantage in relation to other nations. As part of this, we have a 10-point plan, having identified 5 critical technologies, including AI, semiconductors and quantum. We'll prioritise those to deliver its ambition.
James Sunderland.
Mr. Speaker, the Minister will know that I've written to the Department about the future of Syngenta in Bracknell. Berkshire is the Silicon Valley of the Thames Valley, and it's really important we do everything possible to maximise investment and job creation. So will the Minister please agree to visit Syngenta with me and to do what is necessary to ensure that this is not another GSK moment?
I thank my honourable friend and acknowledge his work in encouraging innovation, including Syngenta. And I know my colleague, the Science Minister, has met Syngenta already, and one of us will indeed follow up with you to see what more we can do to support innovation in the Bracknell area.
World-class nuclear skill set and file, with Springfield home to both the only nuclear fuel manufacturing facility and the National Nuclear Laboratory that last year made significant breakthrough in developing lead-212, a cancer-fighting medical isotope. There are real opportunities not only to preserve but build on the success. What conversations has my right honourable friend had with the Prime Minister and other ministers about ensuring that the domestic nuclear capability is a go-to choice for use in the UK and maximising opportunities abroad?
Mr. Speaker, my honourable friend always champions industries and innovation in his area. We recognise the UK's significant capabilities in the nuclear fuel cycle and the benefit that it provides to our energy security and in realising export opportunities. Through the Nuclear Fuel Fund, the government is investing in Springfields and other parts of the supply chain to further expand essential capabilities to realise benefits UK and abroad. And the £6 million medical radionuclide innovation programme will also develop capability in the production of radionuclides for medicine.
Thank you,
Mr. Speaker. The Life Sciences sector is currently very exercised by the unintended but very high levy being paid to the government for branded medicines in the NHS. The risk is that investment and jobs go elsewhere. So what's the Secretary of State doing to make sure that doesn't happen?
So, Mr. Speaker, we are negotiating very hard on this. Obviously, negotiations are sensitive at this time, but we are really very aware of the fact that we are ahead in life sciences. We want to stay ahead in life sciences as part of our key technologies.
Greg Campbell.
Mr. Speaker, biomedical sciences has been a success in my constituency in the Korean University of Ulster. Will he undertake to ensure that that success is replicated and the United Kingdom becomes genuinely a world leader in biomedical sciences?
Absolutely, Mr. Speaker. We know we have a strong cluster there, and universities like Colorado University are really at the heart of that innovation. We will indeed do exactly as he said, make sure we can replicate as much of that clustering around the UK.
Shadow Minister Stephanie Peacock.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. Broadband access is essential to UK competitiveness, yet Ofcom have revealed that just 220,000 of the 8 million households struggling to pay for their internet bill have signed up to a discounted broadband package. When will the government match Labour's commitment to ensure there is an industry-wide, mandatory and well-advertised social tariff for low-income families?
Mr Speaker, there's been a fourfold increase in people taking up social tariffs, but we know we have to do more to help people with the cost of living. That's why we lent in to the carriers in the first place. That's why we encouraged the social tariffs to come up. But we'll indeed do more. We'll work with the carriers to make sure that they get advertised well so we can get better take-up.
We now come to topicals. We start with Dr Lisa Cameron.
Topical one, please.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. For its first 3 months, the Department for Science, Innovation and Technology has been harnessing the power of transformative science to grow a more innovative economy with stronger businesses, better jobs and better lives for the British people. We've touched on AI, we've touched on Pioneer. I can add that our £2.5 billion strategy for quantum tech will unlock its vast potential to the benefit of the British people.
Dr Lisa Cameron.
Many thanks, Mr Speaker. I've been hearing as Chair of the Cryptocurrency All-Party Parliamentary Group about the potential of blockchain technology for jobs of the future, but it seems really important that these jobs are inclusive. So how will the Secretary of State ensure that people with disabilities, veterans and women have opportunities like these to achieve their full potential?
I'm delighted, Mr Speaker, that the Honourable Lady asked this question because she knows I share her deep interest in the labour market and accessibility. So can I thank her for the work that her APPG has done on this? This government's digital inclusion strategy has 4 principles: access, skills, motivation and trust. These principles hold firm for blockchain and other technologies to ensure nobody is left behind.
Michael Publican.
Last year, during the Eurovision Song Contest, the Russian agents attempted to interfere with the voting that was being made for Ukraine. This year, of course, we're hosting the Eurovision Song Contest. What is her department doing to ensure that the integrity of the voting will be maintained?
I thank my honourable friend. The government is always aware there are a number of possible threats to our systems and our events, and I'm not able to discuss the details, but the National Cyber Security Centre are world experts at understanding attacks and providing incident response for the most serious attacks. We want to make sure that all organisations are aware, so we can indeed keep that resilience in our voting process.
The Minister, Chiomora.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. I'd like to welcome the honourable member to her position and wish the member for Chippenham well in her maternity leave. 3 years on, the Tories have failed in a manifesto promise to associate to Horizon Europe, and Britons has paid the price in lost jobs and scientific research. Their Plan B shortchanges British scientists, they're fudging the figures in other ways. Will the Secretary of State confirm that whereas Horizon funding was counted as international science spend, she is planning to count the same money as British science spend to meet her commitment to double British science budget?
Mr Speaker, I think I'd better keep this brief. And the answer that the Honourable Lady knows very well is that we are hard at work negotiating our potential accession to Horizon. That is our preference, as I've been very clear here this morning. But I think she is out of step with key voices in the sector. For example, we hear from the Russell Group, who say that our negotiations are a serious step forward, and the ambition of the proposals for Pioneer is welcome. More details will become clear as negotiations progress, but I cannot give a running commentary.
I think it seems that the Tory science superpower is actually just cooking the books. Now, ministers promised to increase science spend outside London and the South East by 1/3, while doubling it overall so our regions continue to miss out. Now they're refusing to replace European regional development science funding, slashing 600 million from what should be our regional powerhouses. That's not levelling up, it's holding us back. The country knows it, does she?
Mr. Speaker, I think she's mischaracterising this very badly and in a way that does not help to command confidence in our shared mission to make science, innovation and technology the success that it needs to be for this country. She will have seen my right honourable friend's presentation at the budget, the Chancellor's presentation at the budget, which makes clear just how seriously we take science in this country, and that level of ambition will continue.
Aaron Bell.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Last month, Sir Patrick Vallance stepped down as Government's Chief Scientific Advisor after 5 years in the role in which government investments in science has doubled, but most of all, he became a household name for his handling of COVID and the leadership he showed then. So would the Secretary of State join me in thanking Sir Patrick for all his service to the country and welcoming his successor, Dame Angela McLean, and wishing her all the best in the role?
May I, as Science Minister on behalf of the Government, pay tribute to both Sir Patrick and thank Dame Angela for taking on the role. He's been a stalwart servant for science and for this country during difficult times.
We now come to Prime Minister's questions. Sir Stephen Timms.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. At question number one.
Mr. Speaker, I know the House will join the nation and the Commonwealth in sending our very best wishes to their Majesties the King and Queen ahead of the Parliament. This will be a moment of extraordinary national pride, a demonstration of our country's character and an opportunity to look to the future in the spirit of service, unity and hope. Mr. Speaker, this morning I had meetings with ministerial colleagues and others. In addition to my duties in this House, I shall have further such meetings later today.
Sir Stephen Timms.
Mr. Speaker, at question time last week, column 725, the Prime Minister referred to record numbers of people in work. In fact, as he knows, the number of people in work at the moment is still less than it was just before the pandemic, 122,792 less, according to the latest official figures. Will he reassure the House that he's not slipping into the bad ways of his predecessor but one? And will he properly correct the incorrect statement he made last week?
Mr. Speaker, that clarification has already been made, Mr. Speaker, in Hansard, but there are near record numbers of people in work and in payroll, and that is thanks to the actions of this government, Mr. Speaker, one record we're very proud of.
Very much, Mr. Speaker. Non-compliant hand car washes seem like a cheap and quick way to have our cars washed. But unfortunately, behind this £1.8 billion industry is hidden money laundering, fraud, drug dealing, prostitution, labour abuse, modern-day slavery, tax avoidance and many other sinister crimes. This is an estimated £500 million lost in tax revenue, a pull factor for illegal migration, and the pollutants often used are damaging to the environment. Does the Prime Minister agree with me that it's time that we now step away from the voluntary scheme and have a mandatory scheme to protect people?
Well, Mr. Speaker, we expect all businesses to follow the law, including providing fair pay and working conditions for their employees. We're tackling exploitation in the labour market, especially by increasing funding for enforcement bodies to over £35 million a year, and we will continue to keep the position of hand car washes under close review.
We now come to the Leader of the Opposition, Keir Starmer.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Can I join the Prime Minister in his comments about the coronation? Across the House, we're all looking forward to the celebrations this weekend. Mr. Speaker, does the Prime Minister know how many mortgage payers are paying higher rates since the Tory party crashed the economy last autumn?
Well, Mr. Speaker, our record on home ownership is crystal clear. Because of our tax cuts, 90% of first-time buyers now don't pay any stamp duty at all, Mr. Speaker. And last year we saw the largest number of people buying their first home in 20 years, Mr. Speaker. That's a Conservative government delivering on people's aspirations to own their own home.
Mr. Speaker, the question was how many people are paying more on their mortgages each month. And the answer that the Prime Minister avoided giving is 850,000. Nearly 1 million people paying more on their mortgage each month because his party used their money as a casino chip. That's why George Osborne called them economic vandals who created a self-inflicted financial crisis. Not for the Prime Minister and his non-dom thing, Not for the super wealthy they gave tax cuts to, but for mortgage holders all across the country. So, does the Prime Minister know how many more people will be joining them on higher mortgage rates by the end of this year?
Mr. Speaker, thanks to the actions we're taking, in fact, the Bank of England is showing that public expectations of inflation have now eased to a 15-month low, Mr. Speaker. Consumer confidence is at the highest level that it's been at since Russia invaded Ukraine, and because of our stewardship of the public finances, we can see a clear way to reduce debt and bring interest rates down. But, Mr. Speaker, he keeps in this habit of quoting the former Labour shadow chancellors. We know that our plans will deliver lower inflation and lower interest rates, but we know that his plans just mean more debt, Mr. Speaker, and I quote, year after year after year. Those aren't my words, that's the assessment of the former Labour Shadow Chancellor.
Mr. Speaker, the question was how many more people this year are going to be paying more on their mortgages? And the answer that he avoided giving again, he knows these answers. He's got the stats there in front of him. 930,000 people. So by the end of this year, I know they don't want to talk about it, that's why he won't answer the questions. By the end of this year, nearly 2 million homeowners, counting the cost of the Tories' economic vandalism with every mortgage payment they make. And it's not just those who already own their home that are counting the cost of Tory recklessness. The average deposit for a first-time buyer is going up to £9,000. Does he even know how long it would take an average saver to put that sort of money aside?
Mr. Speaker, that's why we've introduced a 95% mortgage guarantee scheme, Mr. Speaker. It's why we're helping people in social housing own their own home through our first homes and our shared home ownership schemes. But, Mr. Speaker, I said these things are working because I said last year we had a record number of first-time buyers, the highest number in 20 years. It was, Mr. Speaker, twice the number of first-time buyers than Labour ever managed, Mr. Speaker. So whilst Labour failed homeowners, the Conservatives are delivering for them.
Mr. Speaker, every week, whatever the topic, he stands there and pretends everything is fine across the country. And every week he does so, he reinforces just how out of touch he is. £9,000, ha ha ha, £9,000 would take 4 years. They think it's funny that 4 years for the average saver to save £9,000. Or to put it a different way, in terms the Prime Minister will understand, roughly the annual bill to heat his swimming pool. But for most people, 4 more years of scrimping is a hammer blow to their ambitions. And now he's kicking them when they're down, because his decision to scrap housing targets is killing the dream of home ownership for a generation. Why doesn't he admit he got it wrong and reverse it?
Mr. Speaker, I promised to put local people in control of new housing, and I'm proud that that's what I delivered within 6 weeks of becoming Prime Minister. Now, he wants to impose top-down housing targets, he wants to concrete over the green belt and ride roughshod over local communities. Now, previously, Mr. Speaker, he did say, he's on record in saying, local people, local communities should have more power, more control. Now he's U-turned. Just another in a long list of broken promises.
Mr. Speaker, the only power he's given to local communities is not to build houses. And we know why he won't change course. He admitted it last month. His councillors simply don't want to build the houses local people need, so he's given them a way out. Picture the scene as he explains this to a family. Mum and Dad paying £4 extra on the mortgage because the Tories tanked the economy. Their eldest paying hundreds more in rent. Their youngest still stuck in the spare room because they need an extra £9,000 for a deposit. Then along comes the Prime Minister and merrily tells them, sorry for crashing the economy. We don't want to talk about that. Sorry I can't help you with the house building, but my councillors don't like it. Oh, and before I go, here's a massive council tax increase for your troubles. Why doesn't he stop the excuses, stop blaming everyone else, and just build some houses instead?
Mr. Speaker, our memories on that short. We all know what happened last time when they were in power. There was no money left for the country. But let's talk about the record. Let's talk about the Labour record on house building, Mr. Speaker. In London, the former Conservative mayor built 60,000 affordable homes in his first 5 years in office. How many did the current Labour mayor manage? Half of that, Mr. Speaker. In Wales, we need 12,000 new homes a year. How many have Labour built in the last year? Half of that, Mr. Speaker. As ever, Labour talk and the Conservatives deliver.
Mr. Speaker, debt doubled since 2010, growth down, tax up, the economy crashed. Mr. Speaker, they're going to need a bigger note. And it's right. But week after week, we debate the issues facing in this place. But looking beyond the elections tomorrow, we also have a hugely significant weekend coming up with the King's coronation. For most, this will be the first time they've seen a monarch crowned. And I hope, and I know across the House, people will hope that people across the country enjoy the ceremony, the street parties, and of course the extra day off. 300 million will tune in. The world will see our country at its best, celebrating the beginning of a new chapter in our history. But it will also be a reminder of the loss of our late Queen, Elizabeth II, and a chance again to remember all that she gave to our country through her dedicated service. So will the Prime Minister join me in honouring our late Queen and wishing the new King a long and happy reign?
Mr. Speaker, as I said at the outset, we're all looking very much forward to the coronation. It will be a very special moment in the history of our country, and I know that we will join with the country in celebrating it. But before we get to the coronation weekend, Mr. Speaker, we have an important day tomorrow, and the choice before the country is clear. When they go to that ballot box, they can see a party that stands for higher council tax, higher crime, and a litany of broken promises, Mr. Speaker. Meanwhile, we're getting on with delivering what we say with lower council tax, lower crime, and fewer potholes. The choice is clear. Vote Conservative, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Labour-run Kirklees Council, Mr. Speaker, as you know, have reneged on a deal to house the National Rugby League Museum at the George Hotel. They've also declared a climate emergency, but they have one of the worst recycling rates in the country. They're building on green fields and now on green belt. They're demolishing Home Firth Indoor Market. We're blighted by litter and fly tipping, and now they're proposing to chop down mature trees in urban areas. Does Mr. agree with me?
No, you'll sit down a moment. I presume you're going to ask a question. You've made a great statement. Quick question.
Does the Prime Minister agree with me that local people can have their say on Kirklees' appalling record by voting Conservative this week?
Mr. Speaker, my honourable friend is absolutely right. It's typical Labour saying one thing and doing the other, Mr. Speaker. It's only the Conservatives that are going to protect the Green Belt. It's a Labour Party that are going to concrete over it. And that's why in Kirklees and elsewhere, tomorrow, vote Conservative, Mr. Speaker.
We now come to the Leader of the SNP, Stephen Flynn.
Mr. Speaker, in 2010, David Cameron convinced Nick Clegg to drop his pledge on university tuition fees. Does the Prime Minister intend to take the credit for convincing the leader of the Labour Party to do likewise?
Prime Minister.
Well, I thank the honourable gentleman for the question. I'd say it's hard to keep up, Mr. Speaker, with a list of broken promises. What I would say on tuition fees is I'm proud that under this government we now have a record number of people that are going to university from disadvantaged backgrounds, Mr. Speaker, and that's because of the efforts we've placed to put more money into supporting those people and those communities to fulfil their aspirations, alongside fantastic new apprenticeships in every part of our country.
Mr. Speaker, for the avoidance of any doubt, the Liberal Democrats don't believe in abolishing tuition fees. The Conservatives don't believe in abolishing tuition fees, and of course the Labour Party, now with their own Nick Clegg moment, don't believe in abolishing tuition fees either. But, Mr. Speaker, is it not the case that the main Westminster parties don't offer young people any hope at all, do they?
Actually, I'll gently point out to the honourable gentleman that if you're from a disadvantaged background, you're far more likely to go to university in England than you are in Scotland.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Conservative Police and Crime Commissioner in Dorset has delivered 174 new police officers. He's quadrupled the rural crime team and has made Dorset the 6th safest county. As recorded crime is 34% higher under Labour Police and Crime Commissioners, does the Prime Minister agree with me that only Conservatives can be trusted to keep local communities safe and make sure offenders face the justice they deserve?
Well, Mr. Speaker, my honourable friend is right. It's a simple statement of fact. Crime is lower in areas which have Conservative police and crime commissioners, and I'm delighted that Dorset has been selected as one of the areas to pilot our new immediate justice scheme, which will deliver swift and visible punishment so victims of antisocial behaviour know that it will be treated seriously and with all urgency.
Caroline Lucas.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. His government's vile and immoral refugee ban bill and the toxic language coming from the Home Office isn't even dog whistle politics. It is a giant, hard-right foghorn blasting out a poisonous them and us narrative, and it plumbed new depths last week when the Home Office Minister claimed that people trying to come to the UK, and I quote, tend to have completely different values to those in the UK. Can he explain what he thinks are so different about the values held by the people of war-torn Sudan? And can he tell us what values are stopping him from creating a Sudanese family visa scheme like he did for the people of Ukraine?
Well, Mr. Speaker, this country has a proud history of welcoming almost 500,000 refugees over the past several years, and we will always continue to do so. But our ability to do that is absolutely hampered when we have tens of thousands of people illegally crossing the Channel every year. And it's precisely because we want to help the most vulnerable people, whether they be in Syria and Afghanistan, Sudan and elsewhere. We must get a grip of this problem, break the cycle of the criminal gangs and target our resources and compassion on those who most need it.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Thanks to this Conservative government and £1.8 million from the Brownfield Land Release Fund, the Conservative-led Solihull Council is getting on with regenerating Kingshurst Village Centre, creating space for new businesses and new homes. But when it comes to economic regeneration, none of the opposition parties have a viable plan, not the Greens, not the Lib Dems and not the Labour Party. And the Labour candidate has gone so far as to scare local people into thinking that the development won't go ahead, despite spades on the ground. So does the Prime Minister agree with me, while the opposition talk down opportunity and the creation of jobs, when it comes to investing in our communities, it's only the Conservative-led Solihull Council that can do the job?
Mr. Speaker, I agree with my honourable friend, and I'm so glad to see the local Conservatives delivering for the people of Solihull, with dozens of new family homes, new flexible commercial space and a new integrated health, social care and community hub. As he said, it's clear for his local area, only the Conservatives can deliver.
Alan Brown.
Mr. Speaker, imagine seeing the car in front of you swerving erratically or suddenly braking for no reason, risking your car slamming into the back of that, endangering those daft enough not to wear seat belts.
Now, this is not the actions of a drunk or reckless driver, but my constituents' experience using Tesla in autopilot mode. Software still in beta phase, but deemed suitable for cars on our public roads. Will the Prime Minister meet with me to discuss the issues with Tesla's autopilot and instigate an urgent critical safety review in terms of its suitability for operation and the licensing of it?
Mr. Speaker, I'm sorry to hear about what happened to the honourable member's constituent. I'll ensure that he gets a meeting with the Transport Secretary to discuss the safe regulation of autonomous and self-driving vehicles.
Cole McCarthy.
Labour-run City of Lincoln Council has destroyed the 40-year reputation of our city's Christmas market and the Christmas cheer that Lincoln benefits from annually. The dereliction of their role, choosing to take the easiest option behind closed doors in secret, in cancelling the market, shows Labour's neglect and disregard for small local businesses, charities and entrepreneurs and voters. Labour councillors in Lincoln should be ashamed of their actions and have rightfully been likened to the Grinch.
Order. Mr. Brennan, I don't need you shouting from the back row. I've always offered a cup of tea to this side, but it's equally opportunity for you to take one. Come on, Carmen.
I thank the member from the opposite side for the extra minutes he's given me, Mr. Speaker. Tomorrow the people of Lincoln will have the chance to remove...
I will not count on that.
Tomorrow the people of Lincoln will have the chance to remove from office the anti-business, socialist Scrooges and elect local Conservatives. Does my right honourable friend the Prime Minister agree with me that for better run local services, business-friendly and support...
Order. I think in fairness to Prime Minister, I think the text went out. I think he's got the answer. Come on, Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, I share my honourable friend's disappointment that after a decision taken by the Labour-run council behind, as he said, closed doors, there will no longer be a Christmas market in Lincoln, ending its 40 years of history. Lincoln deserves better, and I urge the people of the city to vote Conservative.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Ahead of tomorrow's local elections, I've been campaigning in Medway and Swindon. The word on the doorstep is that people are ready for a change and will be switching their votes from the Conservatives to Labour. However, I am concerned that only 4% of those without valid ID have applied online for a voter authority certificate. So will the Prime Minister commit to a post-election review of how many people have effectively been disenfranchised by his government's response to the virtually non-existent problem of voter fraud?
Mr. Speaker, 98% of people already possess a suitable form of voter ID, and the government made available free alternative ID for those that do not have it. The pilots have demonstrated it hasn't significantly impacted turnout, and indeed this was a policy that was introduced by the Labour Party in Northern Ireland all those years ago. It's common in European countries, it's common in Canada, and it's absolutely right that we introduce it here too.
Dr. Mahindra.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Since getting elected in 2019, I've been inundated with correspondence from my constituents in South West Hertfordshire, rightly complaining about huge speculative developments on our beautiful Greenbelt land. Lib Dem-controlled Three Rivers District Council continue to dither and delay their local plan. Does he agree with me that the choice tomorrow is simple? Vote Conservative to protect our Greenbelt, or vote Lib Dem for massive developments on sport land?
Well, Mr. Speaker, my honourable friend raises an important point, and it's always the same with Liberal Democrats, saying one thing and doing the other. We've all seen it, Mr. Speaker. It's the Conservatives that are party of local decisions taken by local people, and it's only the Conservatives that will protect the Greenbelt.
Bernie Kelly-Foy.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Unable to secure an NHS dental appointment, my constituent Ray was forced to go private. It was then discovered that he had a large aggressive tumour in his face and jaw, which required 16 hours of gruelling surgery to remove it. If he hadn't been able to afford it, Ray might not be with us now. This is yet another chapter in the horror story that is the decay of dentistry under this government's watch. So will the Prime Minister accept NHS dentistry is in crisis, and will he meet with me and the British Dental Association to ensure that no one loses their life because they couldn't get a dental appointment? Yes or no?
Mr. Speaker, I'm sorry to hear what happened to the Honourable Lady's constituent, and that's why the NHS has recently reformed dental contracts to improve access. We now invest over £3 billion a year. There are over 500 more dentists working in the NHS this year than last year, and indeed discussions are ongoing between the Department for Health and the NHS around dentistry, and DHSC is planning to outline further reform measures in the near future.
Sir Geoffrey Clifton-Brown.
Every single young person that gets on the housing ladder under a Conservative government makes our communities more sustainable. Would my right honourable friend agree that in order to build the right type of housing and speed it up, we need to fund planning authorities properly through innovative funding?
Well, Mr. Speaker, my honourable friend as ever makes an excellent point, and that's why the reforms that we introduce will provide incremental resources to planning authorities to make sure that planning decisions can be taken quicker. But also, we've strengthened the ability of local communities to put in place local plans. Mr. Speaker, this is the best way for our towns, cities, villages to have control over the development in their area and make sure that it happens in the way that they're comfortable with, and I know that he's supportive of that too.
Polly Lynch.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. The recent ITV documentary Life and Debt Stories from the Edge followed Halifax mum Izzy. Her prepayment energy bills have tripled and she was relying on a local primary school, Ash Green, who are providing free breakfast, budget cooking classes and a hardship fund for their families. When head teacher Mungo Shepherd is asked does he worry about the children at school when he goes home at night, he says all the time, it never leaves you. Does the Prime Minister think it's right that things are so bad that schools are having to become the fourth emergency service for the families that they support?
Well, Mr. Speaker, because of the actions we've taken, a typical family, including those like Izzy's, will be seeing half of their energy bills paid for by the government. That is support worth £1,500 extended in the most recent budget. For the most vulnerable in our society, there's additional support, and £900 for those on welfare, Mr. Speaker, and through the holiday activity and food programme, support for families with the cost and support for food during the holidays. But I would also say, for Izzy and others that are in particular need, they should talk to their council, because the Chancellor has provided over £1 billion of funding to the Household Support Fund. It's there to help families like that need a little bit of extra assistance during this time.
Sir John Whittingdale.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. As my honourable friend will be aware, today is World Press Freedom Day. At a time when the need for professional and factual journalism has never been greater, will my right honourable friend reaffirm the government's commitment to defending media freedom worldwide? And will he redouble the efforts of the government to obtain the release of Evan Gershkovich and Vladimir Kara-Murza in Russia and of Jimmy Lai in Hong Kong?
Mr. Speaker, the government is committed to defending media freedom worldwide, because thriving independent journalism is one of the cornerstones of democracy. We absolutely condemn the politically motivated sentencing of journalists across the world, and our embassies and missions work every day to protect media freedom where they are based. And I know that this is something that my right honourable friend has been a right champion of throughout his career, and I will look forward to him continuing to do so from a different perch as I take rather fewer questions from him over the next few months from this position.
McKinnell.
Mr. Speaker, I want to thank our police forces, who I know will be working hard across the country this weekend to support the coronation events. But police numbers in the North East are down 8% since 2010, and I know the Prime Minister's keen on his maths, so here's a sum. If Northumberland Police has lost 1,000 police officers since 2010, but gained the funding to put back 615, by how much have the Conservatives shortchanged the North East?
So, Mr. Speaker, as we saw last week, there are now a record number of police officers across the country thanks to the actions of this government, and crime is 50% lower than it was when we took office. She talks about investing. She talks about investing in the North East. You know, when we invested Levelling Up Fund in her constituency, £20 million. She said it was transformational, Mr. Speaker. She said it would play an important role in rejuvenating her local area. That's this Conservative government delivering not just for the North East, but for her constituents too.
Mr. Speaker, I was pleased to welcome the Secretary of State for Transport to Newsham recently. This was to see the progress on the Northumberland line. Would my right honourable friend agree with me that this Conservative government, and Conservative government only, is committed to development of this line, keeping Levelling Up on track?
Yeah. Well, Mr. Speaker, my honourable friend has been a fantastic champion for the restoration of this line. Indeed, it was one of the first deliveries from the Restoring Your Railways Fund, and it will be fantastic for his local communities because that connectivity will provide jobs, opportunity and employment, particularly for young people in his local area. And after years, if not decades of neglect, it's this Conservative government that is delivering for the people in his local area.
Rebecca Long-Bailey.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Over 3.6 million women born in the 1950s had their pension age increased without their knowledge. And many, like my constituent, unknowingly gave up work at 60, only to realise they had no income, they couldn't pay their bills, and some have even lost their homes. So my constituent asks the Prime Minister today, will he commit to the fair and fast payment of any compensation that is recommended by the Parliamentary and Health Service Ombudsman to 1950s women for the injustice they have suffered due to maladministration by the Department for Work and Pensions?
Mr. Speaker, this issue has been long discussed in this place, and obviously the honourable lady knows there's an ongoing process which I can't comment on, but rest assured, of course, we will respond appropriately to any recommendations that come our way.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. As Asbestos Awareness Month comes to a close, I would like to draw the attention of the Prime Minister to the dangers of asbestos in workplace buildings. Please will you back the Don't Let the Dust Settle campaign from the Mesothelioma UK charity in my constituency by setting up a register of all workplaces in the country that contain asbestos and determine a timetable of eradication of this terrible substance.
Well, Mr. Speaker, can I thank my honourable friend for raising this important issue? The law does require duty holders to assess whether asbestos is present, what condition it is in, and whether it gives rise to a risk of exposure. And they must draw up a plan to manage this risk, which must include removal if it can't be safely managed where it is located. But I commend her for her continued campaigning on this important issue.
Madeira Wilson.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Nick swims regularly in the Thames at Shepperton. But after a recent dip, he found himself hospitalised with cellulitis for 13 days. His doctors think this was caused by polluted water. Mr. Speaker, what caused that polluted water? Well, because Thames Water dumped filthy sewage just days earlier nearby. So can the Prime Minister tell Nick and everybody else, why does he think it's okay for water companies to keep polluting our rivers for another 25 years?
Mr. Speaker, it was just last week that it was clear there's only one party that's going to protect the environment, and it's the Conservative Party, Mr. Speaker. That's why we've given the Environment Agency more powers of enforcement. That's why we're moving to unlimited fines. And that's why we've got a clear plan to increase investment and increase monitoring of sewage overflows. It was a rank cynicism and hypocrisy of the party opposite that they could not even show up to support those plans, Mr. Speaker.
Anne-Marie Morris.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Newton Abbot constituents face hosepipe bans after torrential spring storms, and are asking me why water catchment plans have not prevented this. Reservoirs, desalination plants and other natural catchment structures require siting where geography and geology allows. Is there a national strategy and implementation plan to increase water catchment and enable cross-water company water transfer to match regional demand to supply?
Yes. Well, Mr. Speaker, water companies publish water resources management plans which show how they will continue to provide a secure supply of water for customers, and I understand that they have been consulting on their latest drafts of these plans. And in my honourable friend's particular area of Devon and Cornwall, where temporary use bans are in place, DEFRA and the water regulators are closely working with South West Water to ensure that the company is taking all appropriate precautionary action to ensure that water supplies remain resilient this year.
That's all for now on Prime Minister's questions. Sean Bailey.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I get what time of year it is. I know we all know the game, but the importance of sticking to the courtesies of this place outside of this chamber are important. The Honourable Member for Birmingham Edgbaston has now appeared in my patch twice over the last 2 days without giving me any notice. I made her aware yesterday of my intention to raise this point of order. She's not even deigned to respond to that in any way, shape or form, and I forwarded that notification to your office this morning. Mr. Speaker, I can anticipate what your response will probably be, and I appreciate that, but can you perhaps, for the courtesy of members in this House, restate the expectation of members when they're attending other people's constituencies in their capacities as members of Parliament? And just to finish by saying, we're a very welcoming place, Mr. Speaker, but clearly we want to make sure that everyone plays by the rules. Thank you.
Yeah. I think I need to answer this one first. Very kind, thank you. Look, I'm obviously grateful to the Honourable Gentleman for giving notice of this point of order. The booklet, the rules of behaviour and courtesies in the House of Commons make it clear that members should make all reasonable efforts to notify colleagues if they intend to visit constituencies, except on purely private visits. And I've said it time and time again to all sides, and I know it's fever time at the moment, but please show the respect that each member is due by letting the member know when there is a visit taking place. Thank you. Don Butler, point of order.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, the Honourable Member for East Ham asked the Prime Minister to correct the record as he misled the House last week. Mr. Speaker, the Prime...
We don't say that. Unintentionally misled. Or inadvertently.
Okay. Inadvertently, unintentionally misled the House last week. Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister has inadvertently, unfortunately, misled the House this week when he claimed that the Tory Prime Minister built more house than the current Labour mayor. Official statistics are not open to interpretation. Last year, the number of new homes in London was up 22% compared to the Tory mayor's final year. More than 23,000 new City Hall-funded council homes have been started since 2018, more than 10,000 in the last year alone. Latest figures, Mr. Speaker, show London has started more than double the number of council homes last year than the whole of the rest of England, and Sadiq, the Labour Mayor of London, has delivered more than 10 times that of the previous Tory Mayor.
Please, I think I got the message. I do need to reply. No, let me reply. It might be helpful to us all. Look, I'm obviously grateful for the Honourable giving notice of the point of order. She will know that the Chair is not responsible for Ministers' answers. If an error has been made, then it should be corrected. And I make that very clear. It is not for the Speaker to determine whether the error has been made. What I would say is, and quite rightly, the Honourable Member has given us a very fruitful line that has ensured that that point has been made correctly. And therefore, I will now move on to the next point of order.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Forgive my eagerness. I've never done this before, but I believe that today at Prime Minister's questions, the Prime Minister inadvertently, unintentionally misled the House on the question of disadvantaged children in Scotland going to universities. The figures he uses are simply the UCAS applications directly from school. In Scotland, as I well know as a former further education lecturer, most disadvantaged children and adults go through the college route, whereby they can do an HNC, HND, move into first, second or third year of a university course, or join an access to higher education course at any time.
Can I just say, I think it's exactly what I've said to the previous member. Obviously, I'm grateful for giving notice. I'm not the one that makes a determination. What I would say is, you've put it on the record, you've certainly corrected, and as I will say again, if an error has been made, I expect it to be corrected, and it's certainly now on the order paper. Right. Point of order, Shadow Home Secretary.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Prime Minister, during Prime Minister's questions, used a figure for crime which didn't include fraud, even though it is the fastest increasing crime and has been one of the most prevalent and damaging crimes. He has been repeatedly challenged on this before, but again used the figure without fraud, and to do so on the day in which he supposedly launches a fraud strategy. Doesn't this show that the government's fraud strategy is actually a total fraud and a con? And does he think the Prime Minister will be ready to correct the record?
think I've already answered that, but actually, I think we've got an itching minister who wants to respond. Tom Tugendar.
Mr. Speaker, thank you very much for allowing me to correct the record. The fact is that we weren't counting fraud in 2010 when we took over the government, and so it was very difficult to draw the comparisons from before. What we've seen since then, though, is a record number of police officers who are solving crimes. We've seen car crime down 22% since 2019 and neighbourhood crime, community crime, down 50%. This is a success for the government.
Right, I think what I would say is I think if research is going to take place, we ought to try to get the figures out correctly in the first place, if that is the case. Now then, let me come to a more sedate moment. Let me come to the 10-minute rule, Bill.